At the UN General Assembly meeting, which happened a week and a half ago now, the not France, the Russian Federation's foreign minister made a speech where he covered various issues that I'm not going to go into. But among the issues that he covered was that Russia supports the addition of three nations as permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. In fact, I think he made the indication that they support um, that India should be a permanent member, and he also said that they support Brazil being a permanent member and one nation from Africa being also a permanent member. So that would mean it to be between South Africa and Nigeria, and there'll be a big hoo-ha about which one qualifies to be. But I'm just saying, I find it to be quite interesting, mainly because I know that the West does not support this, and it's quite interesting that the West does not support um, other nations being represented in the United Nations Security Council and having veto power, just as the US has it, the UK, and France. While the West keeps telling everyone in the world that it fights for democracy, that the sovereignty of states and all of that, then why would the West not support um, continents who do not have a permanent say in the United Nations Security Council, to have that say, because the Security Council is the most powerful organ in the UN. But one thing that I've realized ever since I started looking into the UN in great earnest since around maybe 2015 is that the United Nations is an institution that is not democratic. It's not democratic, it's undemocratic, and it's not democratic by design. And because of that, the United Nations will always have legitimacy issues. Because there's this two-tier system that exists in the United Nations, where you have nations who have veto on some of the most important issues that affect all of us in the world. And then you have a continent that has 1 billion people like Africa not being represented. And also a continent as large as South America. I'm not sure how many people are in South America, but I'm assuming that there's more people in South America than there are in North America. I'm very certain of that. I don't even need to go verify that, but I'm very certain of that. And then you have a small continent like Europe, which has like 300 million people, having not one but two nations represented in the UN Security Council. And these nations, France and the UK, they're irrelevant, to be honest, when it comes to the main issues that affect the world. Apart from the fact that France is still colonizing many African nations right now as we speak in 2025. So obviously, okay, it makes sense for me why Russia would have a veto power and why the US and China would have veto power, but it doesn't make sense for me why the UK and France have veto power. What makes better sense actually is for Germany to have that power, but I understand why they wouldn't have given that power to Germany in 1945, 1946, straight after the World War II. They didn't trust Germany. But with that said, why does it have to be Russia who suggests that, who supports the democratization of the UN Security Council, while we are being told that Russia is undemocratic and these so-called democratic states, all of them oppose Africa having a representative and South America having a representative. And so this is one of the things that make multilateralism difficult and almost impossible, because of the unfairness of these global institutions that clearly favor certain nations and disfavor certain nations, where a most logical thing to do is to have one nation, one vote, and then we can make a world decision based on the will of the majority. But that's not how it happens. What happens is that there's a handful of powerful countries that make decisions for everyone. And also this handful of powerful countries, often international law doesn't apply to them. And that's not just the issue of Russia. It's also the United States of America and all the illegal wars that the U.S. has been involved in from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya. All of these illegal wars, that all of them were started under false premises. So then it makes us wonder then, in terms of this international system, who does it serve? Because it doesn't really serve the world the same way in terms of fairly. This is one of the reasons why many African nations have decided to withdraw from these international criminal courts, because a lot of the times the decisions that are made by these courts disproportionately target certain nations, while they never ever prosecute certain nations. This is why Tony Blair right now still is free. George W. Bush is free, and they are treated as statesmen and respectable statesmen. But when an African leader who did atrocities, those people get dragged in before these criminal courts. So really, there's a lot. There's a lot that one can go into to show that a lot of these multinational or multilateral organizations are not really multilateral. They're not really multinational. They serve interests of certain handful of nations. And so the weaker nations then learn to, okay, you need to choose which of these powerful nations you're gonna side with. Either you're gonna side with the West, or you're gonna side with the East, because there is no justice for smaller nations, except if you are under the protection of a bigger nation. So this is to say, really, that, to be honest, I personally don't take the UN seriously, because the UN is not a serious organization. The UN is purely an organization that exists for power's sake, and not for saving all the people of the world equally. So I don't take it seriously. But this is not to say that it is not useful for certain reasons. But I'm saying I don't take it seriously at all. But if for the United Nations to gain credibility in the rest of the world, where 2/3 of the world is, which is Africa and Asia and South America, they need to add these seats as permanent members of the Security Council. Definitely need to add India and add a seat from Africa and from South America. I would like to hear a rational reason of why South America and Africa don't have a seat in the Security Council. Why? Yeah, but with that said, I'm not holding my breath. I know that Russia maybe supports this because Russia is in good terms with most nations in South America, and Russia has been good friends with most nations in Africa, and Russia is good friends with everyone in Asia. So maybe that's the reason why they're supporting this. But it will also just be grandstanding. I'm not sure which one is it, but it is the right thing to do to democratize the United Nations, which oddly enough is actually an undemocratic institution. Anyways, I also think that it needs to move from New York and go to a more neutral location, like Egypt or something, or I don't know, Qatar. I don't know, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe I don't know. What is the most neutral place actually where the United Nations could go? A nation that is friendly with the West but also friendly with the East. I can't think of any nation outside of Africa. Algeria would actually be ideal for that. Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, central there next to Europe, um, in good terms with Russia and China, in good terms with the West. Yeah, but yeah, anyways.